Started.
It starts at 10, Chair, so you're free to start.
Great stuff. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to May's meeting of Scottish Police Authorities Forensic Services Committee. We've got a full agenda. We have an apology from Angela Leach, so if I drop off the call, we'll have to wait for me to come back onto the call for us to be quoted, but hopefully the tech doesn't let us down today. Can I welcome Andrew Richmond? This is your first meeting of the Forensic Services Committee, so welcome. I hope you enjoy it. We're going to be joined later on in the morning by Brian Plasto, the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner, who's presenting on item 6 on today's agenda, which is the joint assurance review of the acquisition and retention, use and destruction of fingerprints for criminal justice and police purposes in Scotland. We've got various partners from various organisations joining us today. I'm not going to introduce any of them because there's just so many, and we'll take them all in due course. So item 1.2 is apologies. I've indicated we've got an apology from Angela Leach. I should also say it's Graham Stickle's last meeting because he retires, and I just want to record publicly our heartfelt thanks to his wise counsel on risk over the years. So thank you very much, Graham, and very best of luck going forward. I'll have a chance in the private session to say a bit more about that. 1.3 declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Anything conflicting? Nope. That doesn't surprise me. Super. Okay. Is there any other business that anyone's wanting to raise that we'll take at the end of the meeting in AOCB? Again, I'm not seeing anything. That then moves us on to decision on taking business in private. And this is in accordance with section 20 of the SPA's standing orders. Can I invite members to agree that we take agenda items 12 and 13 in private?
Yes.
Great, that's super. Okay, where are we? That then moves us on to item 2, which is minute and actions from previous meetings. Now, the minute of the meeting of the 5th of February has been circulated. Can we approve that as a correct record? Super. Then that takes us on to the action log with 4 public actions due. One is ongoing and 3 are proposed for closure. Chief Superintendent Andrew Patrick has advised that he's going to produce a verbal update on action FSC 002 from the 2005-30-10. And this update can be provided at item 5, and a decision on whether we close that action will be taken at that point. So are people content with that? Great. Then that moves us on to our first really substantive item, which is Director's Report. So Fiona Douglas, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. The Director's Report that's been submitted for this meeting highlights some of the significant operational activity that's currently underway across forensic services. Particularly, I'd like to highlight in this report in relation to drug harm, toxicology, and the evolving nature of drug-related criminality in Scotland. Areas of focus within the report is the continuing work associated with Operation Papillon. Members will be aware that this operation represents a substantial and complex area of forensic activity linked to drug analysis, intelligence development, and support to wider policing activity which targets serious and organised crime. The work reflects the increasingly sophisticated and changing nature of the drugs market, including emerging substances, polydrug use, and risks that these present to both public health and to public safety. The report demonstrates the important role that forensic science continues to play in identifying substances, supporting investigations, and providing the evidential foundation required for enforcement activity and wider criminal justice outcomes. Operation Papillon also highlights the value of close operational collaboration between forensic scientists, policing, the wider justice partners, as well as colleagues within health and within public health. Alongside this, the report notes the sustained pressure on toxicology and controlled drug services, particularly in the context of increased demand associated with drug driving legislation and wider drug-related investigation. Work continues to strengthen resilience and improve sustainability within these areas whilst maintaining quality standards and accreditation. And I would note specifically the financial risks in this area, particularly in relation to drug driving. Members will also note that operational pressures are being managed alongside the final stages of the implementation of the new operating model, which we'll touch on later in the report in the change update, and broader change activity across forensic services. Despite these challenges, the service continues to maintain operational delivery across critical forensic functions that directly support policing, public protection and Scotland's justice system. Finally, I'd like to recognise, as always, the professionalism, expertise and commitment of staff involved in all of the work undertaken within forensic services. Operations such as Papillon demonstrate not only the scientific capability that we have within the organisation, but also the dedication of colleagues working in highly demanding operational environments. Chair, I'm happy to take the report as read and respond to any questions that members may have.
Super, thank you. Okay, I'm going to throw it open to members first, in the first instance. Any questions at this moment from members? Okay, I mean, we'll discuss drug driving performance in a bit more depth, but perhaps you could maybe flesh out a little bit more on the budget and drug driving.
Yeah, sure. So I know as we go through the meeting today, we've got the update from Police Scotland colleagues in relation to Ops Elton and some of the insights from the work that's been undertaken. Within forensic services, we're committed to making sure that we, through a mix of internal capacity and outsourcing, will continue to provide the toxicology analysis that supports the roadside testing and the enforcement activity of Police Scotland. Given the budget settlement that we have, we didn't receive the full funding for the continued rollout of Ops Elton, and also to support the sustained increase in demand that we have seen. However, we are content that we can continue to support that service. We will continue to monitor the financial pressure that brings, particularly around outsourcing, but working closely with roads policing colleagues, and I see DSU Scott McCarran on the call here, so I don't know if he would maybe want to come in and confirm that, or we can talk about it later in the agenda.
Yeah, please do. Scott, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, Fiona. As you may imagine, Fiona and I discuss this matter regularly. Had a number of recent conversations about it. It does remain a focus for us. I've obviously got a paper to present later on in the meeting where I can go into more detail, but we are seeing a year-on-year increase in demand in this area, and very much down to what we've spoken about at previous meetings. It remains a key risk out on our roads, people driving under the influence of drugs. It's absolutely quite right that we focus on that and take enforcement action that we're continuing to the figures demonstrate.
Yeah, no, I welcome that. I think it's, I think you've shown a zero tolerance approach in relation to dealing with drug driving, and forensic services. We forensics have to rise to meet the growing demand. So I think that's very important. But we've got to do that within the context of a balanced budget. So that's going to require a bit of coordination, I think, going forward over a range of areas, I think. So we'll maybe flesh that out in a bit more detail. But I thought at this stage it's important to acknowledge that you've got a zero tolerance approach towards this issue, which is
absolutely
a strong message we need to send out to the general public.
Indeed.
Great. Anything else, Fiona?
No, not in relation to drug driving. I think that there's a theme running through the report, so I'm sure we'll pick that up as we go through the discussions this morning.
Yeah, super. Anything else from board members, other board members at this moment? Just scrolling through my notes. Sorry, I'm all thumbs this morning as per usual. No, I think that's everything from us on the director's report. Again, it's very positive, so I'm very delighted with the things that we're seeing on this. So thanks for that. I'm going to then move us on. We do have a lot to get through this morning. I'll move us on to then the Forensic Services Performance Report, and I think that's Victoria. Vicky, over to you.
That's great. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The report presented today covers Forensic Services performance for Quarter 4 for 25-26, covering January to March this year, and it aims to provide the committee with assurance on performance across the entire organisation. Firstly, if we move to slide 3, which is the executive summary, just to point out a few notes here. As per previous quarters, Quarter 4 performance remains strong, particularly around that urgent casework and scene attendance, and stable within most other areas. There are some areas where increased management focus continues to ensure we drive forward improvements in timeliness, and I'll come on to that later. In this report, we also provide more detail on volume crime DNA performance, which I'll come back to later, which links into the action on the action log earlier on. Also, an additional slide has been included on drugs driving, just really to support that transition from the previous separate paper that we've had presented at previous committees into inclusion into this overarching report. As always, health and safety remains a focus for us, with external health and safety training across all managers completed this quarter, which is a key achievement. And in terms of our people, I can report that the Forensic Services budget for 26-27 has allowed the expansion of our current psychological supervision programme in search and recovery scenes to other areas of forensic services. And that's really an important aspect for us to provide that preventative tool to improve workforce resilience. This report also includes the final position of our 24-26 Forensic Services business plan, and a separate paper is presented later on the agenda outlining our plan for 26-28. So if we move on to slides 4 and 5, these provide the Quarter 4 position of the business plan. Since the last report, 3 further activities have been completed. So that's around the strategic workforce plan and the updated performance framework, which are both approved at the previous committee in February, and also delivery of the 25-26 efficiencies plan. So just to note, as we transition to the new business plan for 26-28, following discussions later on this morning, the format of this reporting will change. So we'll see a little change there for the next report. Moving on to slide 6 and 7, here we outline progress against our Forensic Services performance framework. So overall, strong performance continues with one change since the previous Quarter 3 report. And this is shown in slide 6 under reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences regulations, or RIDDOR. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So just moving on then to health and safety in slide 8. As I've said already, it remains a focus for the organisation, and it's really pleasing to see that the near misses that are reported across forensic services are increasing, and that they're continuing to show that increase. And the number remains significantly higher than the number of actual accidents reported where there is an injury to a staff member. So this is really a positive indicator in terms of health and safety culture, so it's good to see that continuing. As I've mentioned, the health and safety training for all managers and leaders across forensic services continued into Quarter 4, and that's almost complete. This really further enhances the health and safety knowledge, understanding, and of course the responsibilities of all members of staff in terms of health and safety. In terms of the one RIDDOR report, the regulations state that if there is an accident or injury at work which results in an absence of more than 7 days, that must be reported to the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE. So we've had one instance of this in Quarter 4, and I'm pleased to say that in conjunction with Police Scotland Health and Safety, an accident report and appropriate corrective and preventive actions were completed, and there is a very low chance of recurrence of the incident and no further risk to staff. So well done to everybody involved in that piece of investigation. Moving on to slides 9 and 10, we delve a little bit more in terms of our people and provide metrics in relation to working days lost and absence. Of note, I just want to point out the long-term absence remains low at 2.6%, and that's short-term absence has remained elevated in Quarter 4, largely attributable to seasonal illnesses, respiratory illnesses, etc. Of course, working days lost due to absence impacts our available capacity and operational performance. But we do have very strong mechanisms in place and HR policies in terms of managing absence across the workforce. Moving on to slide 11, which notes quality compliance. Of course, our quality management system and accreditation of our processes are very important to forensic services, and in turn provide that confidence to our partners and the public in relation to the forensic activities that we deliver. It's really pleasing to see that we're nearing the completion and closeout of all our findings from the 2025 assessment visit by UCAS, sitting at 86% there. So that's really good progress being made. And I just want to point out that this obviously represents a significant commitment by our people on an ongoing basis to ensure that we comply with our quality management system and the international standards 17025, and of course strive for continuous improvement. In terms of positive feedback, this continues to be raised by our partners. And again, this quarter, we've actually had some positive feedback from Humberside Police Force and also NHS Forensic Physician as well. The number of complaints and negative feedback remain low, with all instances, of course, reviewed, documented, and actions identified to drive forward improvements. The next section of the report really focuses on operational performance. So slide 12 shows that performance in search and recovery scenes remains strong. Quarter four did show an increase in demand. Crime-related deaths, the compliance is really high here at about 97%. Moving on to laboratory delivery on slide 13. Demand has remained relatively stable this quarter again, while our output did see an increase, then a decrease during this quarter, largely due to abstractions around sickness absence and annual leave in March. So you can see that little change in terms of output this quarter. If we look at the pie charts on the right-hand side, these show that there has been a positive increase in the cases delivered within due date. So previous quarter was sitting at 43% overdue, and that has reduced to 36% this quarter in quarter four. It's important to note, obviously, and Fiona's alluded to it in the Director's report as well, that we continue to support significant prioritised police investigations and operations. Of course, that will reduce our capacity to deliver more routine forensic work, but there's activity absolutely ongoing across the organisation to make sure we get the balance right there and we focus on all activity that is submitted into us. And during this quarter, our high volume areas of volume crime and drugs have continued to deliver an increased output as well, which again is a positive since the previous report. And I'll provide a little more detail in the following slides. So if we look at slides 14 and 15, these consider our performance against our MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, the tripartite agreement between ourselves, Police Scotland and COPFS. So slide 14 shows continued strong performance for Crown Office instructed cases. And I would like to point out that also on these two slides, we've actually added an additional key to provide more clarity on the figures after discussion at the last committee. So you'll see that the percentages actually indicate the percentage of cases which met the compliance target. So for example, if you look at the 7-day custodies for Crown Office on slide 14, 99% met the target. And then the number in brackets, 145 in that example, that shows the number of cases closed in that quarter. Slide 15 shows police investigative work. The most urgent requests, priority 1, continue to show that really strong performance at 97%. However, as we've mentioned previously, priority 2 and priority 3 remain a challenge, and timeliness requires improvement, and active monitoring continues in terms of this activity. We did see an increase in the number of P3 cases closed during Q4, which again is a positive step there, mainly in routine drugs cases, as I've already mentioned. So essentially more work was completed in that area this quarter. Of note also is the improvement in volume crime unit DNA cases. Compliance did increase from 2% in Q3 to 11% this quarter. And I've got a more detailed slide coming up shortly to provide further assurance in this area. And also to note that our drugs driving Section 4 and Section 5A cases are meeting the agreed targets there at 95%. It's important to note, of course, that the risk of statutory time limits not being met is actively monitored across all areas of forensic services, and the risk is assessed as low. Moving on to slide 16 and 17, which is our assessment of internal performance based on the more evidence types or disciplines within forensic services. You'll see that the status has been noted as green, on track, with strong performance continuing in search and recovery scenes, chemistry and documents, drugs driving and criminal toxicology. So all of those shown as green in the diagrams there. A volume crime DNA casework remains red due to the low compliance, and as I say, I've got a separate slide on this in a minute. In terms of drugs, they have remained amber at this stage, with ongoing activities to improve performance being progressed. This has included recruitment in this area, so it's going to take a little bit of time there to really gain those benefits, and overall to provide assurance to the committee there are no known risks of statutory time limits not being met in this area as well. In terms of fingerprints, as forecast, performance has improved in this area, and this will continue into Q2. And we anticipate a return to green either in Q1 or perhaps just into the early part of Q2. In terms of post-mortem toxicology, this remains amber. Organisational change is now concluded within Q4 to transition staff from the previous University of Glasgow terms and conditions to SPA terms and conditions. Some recruitment does remain outstanding in this area, and that's ongoing at the moment, and obviously training activity as well. So it's expected that performance will return to green in Q3 of 26-27. But it has been actively monitored, and of course there's ongoing engagement with our Crown Office colleagues and pathologists throughout that time period. In terms of firearms, at this time remains amber as well, as the caseload has increased slightly in this area. They are nearing the final stages of recruitment of the vacancy in this area, which again will provide improved resilience and increased capacity in this area too. And if we move on to the slide 18. So as noted in the action log, it was requested that there was further information provided on areas where they've been assessed as red. And this is shown in this slide here, where we've looked more in depth at the turnaround times. So to provide additional context, the processes and organisational structure have changed quite significantly in the last 18 months or so, as we implemented our change programme. And the embedding of the changes alongside direct submission of DNA samples by our search and recovery scenes staff has led to an increase in the number of samples submitted, and some challenges meeting the target turnaround time of 21 days. So again, it's really a short turnaround for these cases. To kind of put a bit more context on it, every case that is reported on day 22 or above is shown as red. So obviously that's marked as overdue in our system. So the chart on the left-hand side shows our average turnaround time across Q2, Q3 and Q4. And you can see that there's that positive improvement that has been seen with the reduction in timeliness for an average turnaround time to 45 days in Q4. And again, on the right-hand side, this the graph here shows the percentage cases closed within 45 days is increasing. So again, we're closing them quicker, and the corresponding decrease is seen in the percentage of cases closed after 45 days. So in summary, in terms of VCU, the planned process improvements are showing positive signs of improvement in this area, and it's anticipated that there will be continued delivery of these improvements over the next 6 months or so. So once these processes bed in and become more established, we expect forecasting information to be available from Q3, just really to provide that level of accuracy as all improvements are. And then the final slide we have is slide 19, which shows drugs driving performance. Overall, there's continued high performance delivered through internal forensic services capacity and supported by outsourcing, as has already been mentioned, to meet the demands placed upon us from this area of activity. As Fiona mentioned in the Director's report, demand remains high, and we continue to provide the scientific testing, working alongside our partners and wider stakeholders to help keep our roads safe. Also, it's important to note that there are no known risks of statutory time limits not being met due to laboratory delays, and there's continued strong engagement and collaboration with our Police Scotland Crown Office colleagues and wider stakeholders. So overall, the RAG status, I'm pleased to say, remains green. Just to finish off then, in summary, overall performance remains good, with prioritisation of urgent laboratory casework and scene attendances. Some areas of the business see challenges in terms of timeliness, and initiatives are being identified to progress to deliver improvement. And significant progress has been seen in VCU DNA activity, which involves staff from across all our capabilities, search and recovery, analysis and reporting. And we know that it will take time to fully embed the improvements across forensic services, and we welcome the committee's support as we do so. And lastly, I'd just like to thank all my team and everyone across forensic services for their ongoing commitment to deliver forensic science for Scotland. And on that, I'll pause and open up to any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Super. Thanks very much for that very comprehensive run through last quarter's performance, Vicky. Can I kick off with a couple of questions? Firstly, I'm just seeking a bit of assurance about the Riddler incident, and I'm conscious that as non-execs we're not supposed to get too involved in the operational detail, but every now and again, if something is severe, we've got to be cited on it. So can you maybe give us a little bit more about how severe that incident was?
Yes, Chair. I can state that there was an injury to a member of staff within a laboratory area at one of our sites. It did result in further investigation, and immediate actions were taken in terms of it was around the fabric of an area of the building, and that has been resolved and immediately, and a thorough investigation has been undertaken. So I can give that assurance that it's very unlikely this would happen again.
Right. Well, did something fall on someone or something like that?
Yes,
right.
Yes,
okay.
It resulted in a cut injury. Thank you.
And was the person in hospital more than? How badly injured were they?
There was medical intervention just immediately after the incident.
Right, but they're not seriously hurt or anything.
Yes.
Is that yes? They were seriously hurt. Yes, they weren't seriously hurt.
There was an injury which required medical intervention, but they have been recovering well from that. I don't know if Fiona wishes to add any more there.
Yeah, just to provide some reassurance, Chair, that there was a minor injury that was was incurred as a result of the incident. There wasn't significant medical intervention required, and the member of staff is now back at work.
Super. Thanks for that. It's just we need to be cited in these things. Great. Katharina.
Apologies, I'm a little bit slow today. No, thank you very much for the report. And there is lots of really positive elements in the report. So I mean, I noticed the progress that you've made against your business plan. Again, it's really good to see the number of actions that have been closed and the number of actions that are on track. I also really welcome the additional detail that you have included into your report in relation to volume crime. And this is just kind of an area that I really wanted to focus on a little bit, because the more detail you give us, obviously, the more questions that arise from that. So just to kind of aid my understanding, as I say, so I think, yeah, the additional narrative is really, really helpful. But then I look at the data that you've provided, and again, I appreciate that you're saying it will take a little bit longer before you can give us projections, because I think last time around we asked specifically for that projection in terms of, you know, going forward, when do you think you will be able to achieve the 21-hour kind of target? I appreciate you saying that you can't do it just now, but we will get hopefully something in the future. So in the meantime, what you are giving us is that improvement that demonstrates that the turnaround time has in fact been decreasing. So the trend is downwards, and I think that is definitely positive. So some of the questions I have around that, I mean, I was just really struck by how you referenced the legacy 21-day turnaround time and the fact that it isn't, you know, indeed quite short for you. So firstly, is it a realistic target in the first instance? You know, I appreciate it's a target. You know, you refer to it as the legacy 21-day target. You reference the fact processes have changed. There's different streams through which now the demand comes into the unit, if I understand it correctly. You know, I suppose once we have the projections, and maybe you'll tell me, you can't tell me just yet whether it's realistic or not. Will you ever get there? You know, so but is it realistic? And I'm also really interested in hearing from possibly our Police Scotland colleagues as to whether or not, you know, what drives the 21-day target. Is it such that after 21 days, the value of the analysis, maybe from an investigative perspective, drops substantially or not? You know, so what drives that? You know, similarly, I suppose what I observe is that you're saying 40% of cases were reported within 45 days. And again, I notice, well, 45 days is still substantially above the 21-day target. So could you give me a little bit more context, as I say, about 21 days, and at this stage, your analysis of, will you ever, given the current state of, you know, given the current capacity, even maybe accounting for some of the improvements that you're clearly seeing in your turnaround times, will you ever really get there? Or is it just one of those questions? Is it maybe just the question of, well, if it's really important, the 21 days, it would actually require additional capacity? Apologies for this kind of scrambled question, but there is a lot of data here. So it's 21 days. Will you ever get there? I think that's kind of what I'm asking. Or should we just really adjust our expectations down? Or is it too early to tell?
Great, thanks very much for the questions there. Just to start off, the majority of cases in this workflow, if you like, are around undetected crimes, and again around those less serious, perhaps more acquisitive crime in terms of groupings there. Whether it's realistic or not, ideally I think we should be aiming for getting back to 21 days. It is very, very ambitious, I would say, at this point in time. But I'm confident that we will get nearer that figure within the next 12 months or so, as all these processes that we are just implementing and these continuous improvement activities really embed into the systems. I think it's important as well, and I think we discussed at the last committee too, that to recognise that by we are, I suppose, outlining benefits to our Police Scotland colleagues because of this direct submission route. So if you took from an incident date all the way through to where we are reporting, we will be seeing already improvement there, but it's because we're only looking at the forensic services aspect of the workflow there that we're seeing that at the moment higher than we would anticipate turnaround times. So overall, I think we should absolutely aim for that 21 days. There is an opportunity to review alongside our Police Scotland and COPFS colleagues as we review our MOU, which is work that's ongoing. But I think it's important that we really strive to improve acquisitive crime turnaround times to help our policing investigations.
I'm conscious we've got a number of hands up that want to come in on this? I'm going to go to Fiona first and then Tim, if that's okay, Katharina and Andrew, and I'll maybe come back to you, Katharina, and then Andrew. So Fiona.
Thanks, Chair, and Katharina. Thank you very much for the question, and Vicky for your comprehensive answer. I think, Katharina, I think what I would reflect is the changes which we've made within the operating model for forensic services are all about us being able to focus further on providing faster forensic intelligence in less serious crime, but quite often the less serious crime is what people and the communities across Scotland are more likely to experience. And the purpose of the operating model was to make sure that we prioritise this space. So undetected crime should be very near the top of the priority list, and unfortunately with the capacity constraints that we've had, it isn't, and it should be. And that was all about why we invested in the operating model. And it's early days, and we've not seen the full benefits realisation of the changes which we've made. And we also didn't have the full investment that we needed to make the changes in the timeliness which we sought to. This is a space, and I'm happy to pass on to Tim Mayers to either disagree or agree with my perspective. It's a space where we need to be faster. I mean, forensic intelligence, the faster that it can be provided to Police Scotland, the more value that it has the potential to bring. So I know that this is an area where, when we look to benchmark with forensic science providers in England and Wales, this type of work is delivered far faster than it is in Scotland. So we need to not get distracted by the challenges of achieving the target. We need to keep our focus on making sure that we can provide this faster and faster, and it's going to be an incremental improvement process because we're working on the basis of not having the upfront investment that we sought. But I think it's really important that we continue to focus on delivering swift forensic intelligence to our policing colleagues so that they can then act upon it. I do think it's an area where we need better visibility of the system. So what is happening after we provide DNA match reports to Police Scotland colleagues, and really, is it delivering the value that we expect to see from a system-wide perspective? But I'll pass over to ACC Mayers.
Tim, over to you.
Thank you. And back to know I'm going to agree with everything Fiona said. As I just haven't moved into this role, having just left the acquisitive crime role, and I know Andy Patrick led on that as well with me. I really welcome the ambition in this space, and I don't think we should be scared of being ambitious. I would say we all know that the story of public services during financial cuts is the likes of volume crime just gets deprioritised, and we just say, well, that doesn't matter anymore because we need to focus on the serious stuff. So for me, certainly having come from Northern Ireland, a 28-day turnaround on kind of forensic material for volume crime in Northern Ireland would have been exceptional. It is really critical to the process. So for us, we know that a large amount of acquisitive crime in particular is committed by a small number of repeat offenders. So our ability to get access quickly to forensic data that gives us the intelligence and identifies that person and allows us, particularly with the pressures in the courts, to bring forward the maximum number of charges, maximises our opportunity to then effectively put a circuit breaker in there and potentially get somebody remanded. When you look at housebreaking and theft of motor vehicles in particular, there's real public risk around that. So I'm really supportive of the target, and if it means we're not quite hitting it yet, the ambition I think is really, really encouraging, and I'm really encouraged by Fiona's words. But I also think Fiona's last point is critical, which is there's no point in having a 21-day turnaround if it then sits somewhere and isn't actioned. So it's my responsibility to ensure that we are then maximising the impact of that material to deliver the public safety outcome. So for me, 21 days feels really positive, really ambitious. There's really large benefits for us around protecting the public and detecting crime, but it's not only for forensic services to manage that, and it's our responsibility to then ensure the impact. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, you wanted to come in on this point?
No, it was a new item.
Okay. Katharina,
Yeah.
back to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everybody for kind of providing the answers. I mean, from my perspective, it is encouraging. It is good to hear. It's good to hear the commitment. I think what I'm thinking is it needs to be realistic. So I think to have the aspiration is good. I think, Fiona, you're talking about a delay in kind of investment in the space. I just noticed that it feels like quite a hurdle to climb, to get. So there's a lot of efficiencies you'll need to realize in the process to really kind of get it done. And I know that you know that. So I think if it is as important as it is, and I fully agree, Tim, I think everybody's been speaking about the importance of acquisitive crime, the importance of and exactly as you described, Fiona, the fact that it's this type of crime that really impacts in our communities and is really quite visible. So I think the intention is good, the ambition is good. The whole system visibility is potentially something that we're maybe missing. And again, I don't know if it's a scope within the scope of this committee, but maybe this is something for Policing Performance Committee or something. So I think seeing the impacts of this area of activity for the wider system would be quite good. I am just conscious, and I know I need to be patient. So you said you give us projections later down in this year, because if we are still ambitious about this, and I hear that it is an important target, then I think we just need to make sure that it does get the resourcing that it requires. So wait patiently waiting for you to realize all of your efficiencies, and then maybe there's another conversation to see if we can get, how close can we get to the 21-day target, and then what is the value of that in terms of the wider system. So I appreciate I need to be patient. You've given me some degree of reassurance, and it's, as I say, at the very least, it's positive that everybody is really ambitious in this space. Thank you.
No, thanks for that, and thanks for the question. I'm looking at the chart, and to get it down to 45 days from 92, the turnaround time, I think, over 2 quarters, I think is really welcome, and is, we've got another meeting in a quarter's time, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of progress that is made. Because the thing is, once you've got a backlog, you're kind of you're always looking after the backlog and never quite addressing the stuff that's coming in through the door. So hopefully we'll be closer to that. I'm curious about, because this is one of the things in the MOU, the performance markers about MOU compliance, and we also have that on drug driving. When do we review the MOU?
The review is actually ongoing at the moment. So Alistair Patience is leading that for Forensic Services, engaging with, of course, COPFS and Police Scotland.
Okay, so when would we expect to see that, Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. So we've held one meeting with Police Scotland and Crown colleagues, and we'll be having a second one the next couple of weeks. I would anticipate it would be a short number of months for the full review, and the intention is that the main MOU will be combined with the drugs driving one, and the content will be refreshed across both. So a small number of months, I would anticipate.
Super. Sorry, Andrew, you've been very patient. I'm going to bring you in now. Thank you.
It's okay. I had a few questions, Chair, and indeed that was one of them in terms of the timeline of the MOU review. I wanted just to, firstly, as a new committee member, acknowledge the good performance of the balanced scorecard against the outgoing business plan. But I wanted to ask about the core operating system. I note it's mentioned in the new business plan that we're looking at Agenda 9 later on, and it mentions a full business case coming later in the year. I just wanted to get some reassurance as to the delivery of that full business case for the committee to consider in terms of timeline and context.
Great, thanks very much for the question, and I'll maybe pass that on to two colleagues who are heavily involved in this piece of work, Helen Howarth and also Joanne Tierney. It is also mentioned in Joanne's report later on under the change programme, but do you want to give any further information there?
Yes, happy to take that question. In terms of the delivery, we are working to a timeline and remain on track for a delivery of the full business case in October for presentation through the governance channels. We are making good progress, which is covered in the change update report. Currently, navigating our way through a procurement exercise because we will be making a recommendation for contract award as part of the full business case, as well as the full resource profile required for delivery. Helen, in her role as product owner, is working closely and taking the lead in the project team in terms of supporting the progress of the evaluation, and also starting to turn to consider what will be required for delivery and implementation, assuming approval of the full business case. But we remain on track for delivery as per the programme timetable.
Just to also add to that, this is obviously a key project for services, and we're very pleased to have a really strong team across our Police Scotland colleagues in terms of services back in relation to the change functionality. So thank you again to Police Scotland for provision of that resource to drive this forward.
Thank you very much for that, and I look forward to seeing that in due course. Can I just come back on the MOU topic slightly and just get some reassurance, probably from Fiona, I suspect, that for the drug driving cases which are outsourced to a third party, what reassurance can you give that they have sufficient capacity to cope with the increased volume? And I know we're discussing this report later, I think agenda item 4 actually, but what reassurance can you give on that throughput?
Sure, thanks, Andrew. So we have regular contract review meetings with our outsourcing provider. So we are always discussing what we expect the demand on their services to be. We've just recently renegotiated our contract with them. So we'll have a new 5-year contract going into action in September. So we have reassurance from them that they have sufficient capacity to be able to meet the anticipated demands that we have for the year ahead, and that includes our assumptions around the ongoing higher level of demand than is set out within the Memorandum of Understanding. I mean, we're always a little bit at the behest of what happens in England and Wales with policing colleagues in terms of the amount of enforcement activity that happens down south, but we do have a very strong relationship with our outsourcing provider and ongoing discussions with them. So I think the level of risk in relation to availability of capacity is very low for the year ahead.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Can I ask, just on drug driving, I see that internal outputs dropped slightly for Q4. So how's that all being managed?
Yes, in terms of the output in this area, we have seen, as noted in the report, quite an impact in terms of sickness absence, staff abstractions, and staff movement also to post-mortem talks through that restructure and organisational change there. So it's very much being monitored closely across all of national services in terms of PM talks and criminal toxicology. Obviously, we did have increased demand as well, so we supported that through an increased outsourcing in March in particular.
And I notice also we've got 10 cases over the 110 days from incident, but we don't have any narrative about those. Can you maybe give us a little bit of explanation as to what the story is there?
Yes, I have, of course. So Forensic Services work very closely, of course, with Police Scotland to review all outliers, such as those noted in the right-hand side diagram there that you've pointed out. Each of these are looked at on a case-by-case basis, and there may be a number of factors which mean that this work is still ongoing. It could be, for example, the timeliness of submission, but most importantly, the complexity of some of these cases. So there's different panels of drugs that are looked at initially, and then further work can be required. And again, it's very much based on the severity of the case as well. So it's more the very complex cases that are in that right. Longer time frames.
And no danger of time out with those?
No.
No, that's really good to hear. There's maybe a couple of other issues in drug driving we'll touch on in the change programme and risk when we get to those, but I like the fact that we've now got this incorporated into the main performance report. Just another couple of things to pick up before I move the bit. I'm just, hang on, I'll just check there's no more hands up. Sorry, joys of working on one screen. UK assessment programme nearing completion, 86% of findings now successfully completed. So I've got to just say that's really good to hear. And also search and recovery scenes performance is really strong. And again, I do welcome that. So I think you've been grilled enough on this, Vicky. So if members are okay, can I suggest we move on to the next agenda item, which is item 3.3, Forensic Services Financial Monitoring Report, which is Fiona Douglas. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to apologise at the outset that the timing of this meeting has led to a little bit of complexity in terms of we only had the period 11 data at the point in time that this report was written. So I won't focus on that. I'll give you a flavour of what the indicative period 12 update is, which is the year-end position. So from a revenue perspective, we've been showing an underspend on the revenue budget for the full year pretty much, and the forecast underspend of 1.1 million is looking, there's not looking to be any significant changes to that for year end. I still don't have the full confirmed year end figures, so we would still expect to see an underspend position in terms of revenue at year end. From a capital perspective, again, the report's confusing because it reports the period 11 position where there was some risk around the significant project, which was part of the DNA robot replacement capital expenditure. That was delivered within the financial year. So we had 400,000 underspend on the capital budget, but that was due to a number of projects that were delayed at the request of Police Scotland Finance colleagues to move from this last financial year to this financial year. So that will be part of this year's capital spend. Reform is a slight underspend there of 300k under budget, which is really due to the resourcing that's been available to forensic services to support the key change projects over the year. So all in all, a fairly positive financial position for the year. We move into the next financial year with a slightly more challenging position, given that we are now pretty much recruited to our headcount. So for the year ahead, where we have been previously reporting underspends against our staff budget particularly, we don't expect that to continue for this financial year, and in fact it creates more discussion in and around the financial pressures that forensic services will be under, and the key one of those which we're monitoring closely is around the costs of outsourcing from a drug driving perspective, which we've already touched on. I'll pause there, Chair.
I don't particularly have any questions on this. I think it's very positive that you've almost I'm going to mix my metaphor, landed the super tanker on point. But anyway, does anyone else have any questions on this? Andrew?
I think it's just to note that the committee recognises that the release valve of being able to underspend on headcount due to slower recruitment than anticipated or faster departures, however one wishes to phrase it, that release valve isn't there going into the new year, and I think it's wise that committee members note that that's been told to us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite well made. Any other questions or comments on this from anyone? No. Okay. Well, we'll put our hard hats on for next year, or for this financial year, and hopefully it won't be quite as bad as you fear, but we'll just have to see. Great. I'll move us then on to the next item, which is agenda item 4, incremental roadside testing. And we've got Chief Superintendent Scott McCarran leading on this. So welcome, Chief Superintendent.
Thanks very much, Chair. As you touched on at the start, drug driving has been a focus and will continue to remain a focus for Police Scotland due to the reasons we've discussed before in some detail. Far too many people out there driving their roads under the influence, and we'll continue to take enforcement on that. So since its inception of the Section 5, it has almost predominantly been road policing officers who've been trained on carrying out the drug wipes, but I think it's probably important to remind everyone that that does not prevent local policing officers from impacting on drug driving. It just means that they then need to request a road policing resource to come and do the test for them, but then the local policing officers continue to carry out the rest of that process. As you can see from the detections, year on year, we have increased significantly, and this year, it says in the paper, we're anticipating an increase, but that is confirmed as a significant increase. I think this year, in terms of positive tests, was about 3,871. So when you look back to 22-23, where it was 2,551, it shows that significant focus that Police Scotland has in detecting and impacting on road safety in relation to drug driving. Also to point out, we have a very positive detection rate in terms of 57%, so it shows we're stopping and testing the right people. As we discussed at previous meetings, we picked 2 subdivisions last October to carry out a pilot to train local policing officers, one being in Aberdeen and one being in Ayrshire. I think 36 officers trained on that. So that has resulted in 35 positive tests over the last 6 months, which is, as you'll understand, less than what road policing officers have done. However, I think it's important to understand the context behind that. There's very much a different demand profile in local policing compared to road policing. And also, I suppose when you look at the figures for road policing, their confidence and expertise has improved year on year for the figures I've just given, whereas local policing officers here are fairly new to this. So that may change going forward. If you look at, however, the current budget position, so as I indicated at the start, very close engagement with forensic services, with Fiona and the team meeting a monthly basis. So when we look at our current financial position, we will keep a focus on drug driving between local policing and road policing. However, in the current financial climate, we're not going to be carrying out any further training for local officers across the country. But just to reiterate, that does not mean that we will not be testing people across the country. It just means that it will be the road policing officers coming to assist local policing in that regard. I think that's a kind of summary of the paper. I know it's been discussed in great detail a number of times, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
That's terrific, Scott. Really succinct and well presented. And the first thing I was going to ask about was just for assurance about, even though the rollout is kind of paused, that there's still going to be something happening on the ground, and you've given us that. The next thing I was going to ask about was extrapolation. What's the learning from this? Can we extrapolate from this to national sort of picture of demand? What does it tell us?
Yeah, as I said, it's less in terms of what local policing officers have done compared to road policing, but it goes back to the point I made at the start. Demand is increasing year on year, so it doesn't really matter, I suppose, who's doing that testing. You know, that we are seeing that every year we are detecting more people drug driving. We have been a lot more focused in our media campaigns over the last number of months. I would like to hope going forward that people listen to that message, understand that if you are driving under the influence of drugs, there's a very good chance you're going to be stopped and detected for that. So the learning is that we are increasing, so every year we're seeing an increasing demand in drug driving. The benefits to roll out further, but as I say, it's just not the right thing to do just now.
Yeah, Katharina.
Thank you, Scott, for the paper and for the presentation. Really clear, as the chair has said. I just wanted to put that into a little bit of context, and please help me. So if I kind of go back to, are all roadside police officers now trained in the administration of these swipes? So is it 100% of everybody who does the job? Are they all trained and sort of equipped? I suppose what I'm trying to kind of get to, what kind of jumped at me is that a total of 32 local policing officers were trained across the two divisions and across the 2 areas where it was within those 2 subdivisions. Presumably those 32 officers aren't 100% of the local policing officers. So it probably was just a subset. So it was a relatively small pilot. So I'm just trying to kind of get a scale for if 100% of roadside police officers are trained in administration, but it was a much smaller local policing officer subset that was trained. I mean, I think your hypothesis was local policing officers would be using would be administering less roadside tests or less tests. But you didn't train 100% of local policing officers, I suppose, is where I'm getting at. Could you be seeing higher numbers if you trained more local policing officers?
So what I'm saying is that in terms of this was put in place before I started. But the methodology behind it was, on average, how many tests does each road policing officer do, and that was used as I said, to try and benchmark what the financial position would be in terms of that level of demand. So what we've looked at is the number of tests each road police officer would generally carry out over a set period of time. But that equates to a local officer, they're doing less per head, if that helps clear it up.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think your assurance is really good around the fact that if there's suspicion, then road policing officers will be pulled in to do the testing if anybody really suspects that there is drug use. So I think that's really quite good. I suppose what I'm trying to understand is when somebody identifies that potentially a test would be needed, but road policing officers need to be pulled in whilst they're doing that, they're, I suppose, presumably not doing something else. So there is that opportunity kind of cost, I think, when it comes to resource. I appreciate it's getting, potentially complicated quite quickly here with all the different variables. And, at the end of the day, we absolutely need to have that conversation as to what is it that we can afford in terms of increased demand. And you alluded to that, you're speaking with Fiona. I think it's good that we run the pilot. I think the pilot has confirmed a very narrow hypothesis that, per capita, local policing officers use less. I think we kind of went into the pilot, having that expectation. I think, do you feel that it has given you enough information to extrapolate that sort of to a national picture? I suppose I just feel like we've done the pilot, we've confirmed something quite narrow, but the bigger picture still is, what is it that we need? What are the tools we need to make available to everybody who is potentially in a situation where they would want to use that? And do we have enough data from a national perspective?
If you remember for maybe the first meeting that my predecessor, Chief Superintendent Sloan, did, the initial plan was clearly to roll it out more. However, because of the financial situation, we've had to stop after 2 subdivisions. So it has changed the intended data set. But I do think it is still useful in terms of the data we have already. We now have more police officers trained in roadside tests. I'd like a lot more. And like you allude to, that there is clearly an advantage of rolling out further in local police officers in terms of taking some of that demand away from road policing officers. But just with the current financial situation, it just wouldn't be the right thing to do just now to understand that longer term model for testing.
Thank you.
Fiona, you were wanted to come in at this point?
Yeah, please. Just to address Katerina's point and to support Detective Chief Superintendent McCarran there. I think we have done an awful lot of work. Sam Curran leading from forensics perspective on what we think the demand forecast in the future. So the full zero tolerance approach would look like in terms of demand, and that's been modelled and is incorporated into the initial business case, which has been approved, and then the full business case that will come to members in October time. So we have a good idea about what that maximum level of demand could be. I think what the pilots are giving us insights, absolutely giving us insights, and the Shetland pilot, I think, gives us some really interesting insights into community impact. And then the 2 pilots that have recently been done give us other information, and I think particularly interestingly around the competing priorities around local policing. We know that local policing officers have a a vast array of different activities that they're undertaking, and adding roadside testing to that. I think we need to understand, and there's ongoing activity to understand how that fits in and around the other priorities that local policing officers have. So we do need to do further work around what that demand forecast looks like realistically within the long-term sustainable model, and the work that needs to be done in that. And I think we're very keen, and I was chatting with Scott just yesterday about how we pull more of that forecasting information into the long-term sustainable model from a Police Scotland perspective. So I think there's still quite a lot of work to do, but I think the pilots have absolutely given us further information, maybe not as much as we had hoped given the lower numbers, but I certainly think there are key insights there that will be really valuable, I think, in terms of how we build a model for how we deliver this in the future, and the investment that's required to do that.
Thanks for that. I've got Andrew's hand up. Is it on this particular point, Andrew? Because I've got Tim's up as well. Well, I could get you in just now, and then I'll come back to you, Tim, in a second. Okay. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you. It's very similar to Katharina's last point. Is clearly, whether one looks at the trial with community policing or local policing, should I say, compared with road policing, the numbers of positive tests are truly shocking in terms of the people who are tested. I know we can't have reassurance today that the impact of this on traffic, on road policing, is X or is Y, but I just want to get some assurance that we're going to try our best when this comes to FPC to work out a metric to scale what the impact on road policing is. Because potentially, of course, this could be taking resource away from more urgent matters. And I just want to get some indication that will be fully taken account to as we go forward, and there'll be best endeavours to work out a way of measuring this. I know it's not easy.
I'm not sure who's going to respond to that, or will I just get Tim in it, or Scott first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of that will come down to kind of qualitative information. I have been out speaking to road policing officers with regards to the pilot. There would be clearly a preference where we can to roll it out further to take that demand away. So, we can see where local policing officers have stopped a member of the public and requested a road policing officer. So we've got both kind of quantitative and qualitative information that we could look at to come up with some form of metrics for that. I just want to maybe clarify as well in terms of that 57%. What I'm not saying is 57% of the public, are driving under the sort of drugs. We are very focused in terms of our criteria for testing some of them. So just to reiterate that point as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you,
Tim.
Thanks. It's probably just to pick up on that wider point. One of my priorities is to get a sit down early and make sure that we are providing across the board solid projected data for Fiona and the folks to plan against, because I appreciate planning timelines, and this is a good case study of that. We can't expect SPA forensics to increase capacity in a short period of time. It takes a long time to recruit and train experts, to invest in equipment. So there is a responsibility on us on two parts. One, what does the data tell us about the trends? And number two, what are the service levels we would expect to be applying? And this is a really good example of that. We remain under pressure resource-wise as do SPA forensics. So there is that prioritisation bit from the business model around how much would we reasonably expect in balance with roads policing officers who are patrolling areas, who are enforcing against organised crime groups using the roadway, local policing officers who are managing risk around domestic abuse and violence in public space. Coming to that reasoned position, agreeing that within Police Scotland, and then providing SPA forensics with that business service level, if you will. But we need to be doing that across every discipline, not just this area, because that in itself may long-term start to solve options if we're saying there are areas we think could be dialed down, and areas like toxicology maybe need to come up. So that for me is the number one priority, and I'm really, really keen to get into that, because I think it's the least we can do to support our colleagues who are doing such a good job in forensics.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for all of that. Just one last question, maybe a tangential thing, but Scott, you mentioned about the comms and getting messages out to people about drug driving and the testing that's been rolled out. Is there anything in our communications about just the fact that drugs stay longer in the system than alcohol? Because if you have a glass of wine or something, you know, after 3 or 4 hours, that's worked its way through your system. Whereas with drugs, it can be sometimes more than a week. So it's not just, you know, don't do drugs, but if you are going to do them, don't get behind a wheel. If you are going to do that, don't do it for a week or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I don't remember exactly the last time we put it out, but you know, it's a really valid point. But I suppose we just need to be careful because maybe like drink, it affects everyone different. So you couldn't be particularly precise in terms of. But I think the general theme of it was definitely that it does stay in your system probably longer than you would think it would.
Yeah. It does affect everyone differently, but from everything I've read, which is difficult to nail things down, it stays days rather than hours.
Absolutely.
And I don't think a lot of people realise that.
Yeah.
So
No, it's a good
anyway,
point.
it's not something we can resolve here and now. It's just an observation. Great. I think we've had a really good discussion over that. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item, which is digital forensics, the next step, and the timeline for progression. So that's DCS Andrew Patrick, who's joining us for that. Welcome.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everybody. I intend to probably just take it that the paper is as read by the committee today and maybe just kind of frame it with a few points I'd like to bring out before maybe inviting questions, if that's okay. So just a short introduction and background to the paper. Digital Forensics Data Analysis and Sharing Capability Project, just rolls off the tongue. So the kind of background to this is I obviously came into this role back in, I think, last summer, and a paper was submitted to the committee outlining the rationale for pausing the pursuit of the ISO 17025 accreditation within digital forensics. Now, there was a number of reasons for that, but the pause was formally agreed in December 2025, allowing us to focus on the essential infrastructure and resilience in relation to digital forensics. And today's focus in the paper provides an update on the next steps, specifically focusing on the 3 pillars that we've decided to invest in. That's around data management, lab automation, and kiosk capability. And this has come about because of the current challenges that we've got at the moment within digital forensics and across the whole of Police Scotland. Because digital forensics as a service isn't a siloed unit, it doesn't just focus on SCD and specialist crime. It services all of Police Scotland, from frontline domestic incidents that officers are dealing with to high-risk critical crimes. And from that, unfortunately, the sort of system that we have at the moment in Scotland creates a bit of a bottleneck, in that there's no sort of central system to allow us to remotely view the data, which makes it particularly challenging. It creates inefficient workflows for us. It means that extracting the data relies on manual processes, including physical movements of CDs and hard drives between labs and officers, which is not good at all for us. And currently it's created a bit of a backlog, quite a substantial backlog for us, with the figures that are quoted within the report are 2,691 outstanding examination requests, 7,945 devices awaiting full examination, and that's been an 11% annual rise in device submissions. The consequences of that is a number of standard forensic instructions are missed during the course of this. And by saying missed, I don't mean that every single case falls or anything like that. I just mean that the timescales that we agreed to with COPFS are missed, and often takes us towards kind of critical times around about those particular cases. There are risks of cases collapsing and legal repercussions from the ICO and some of that. So what we've done to tackle that is come up with a solution for some of it and some other capabilities, which I'll speak about. The main one I wish to touch on is the data analysis and sharing capabilities. So it's an evolution of a project that was formerly known as the Data Management Capability. The project has been renamed to better reflect the goal of enhancing both the analysis and the sharing of the data. And the core objective of the project is to deliver a platform that allows officers to review extracted data remotely and immediately. And I'm sure you can imagine that's really important, given the geography that we've got across the whole of Scotland. When you start to think about islands and remote areas, the timescales and lags that are created by those boundaries. So what we hope to see from that is some real benefits in relation to side-by-side work between digital forensics analysts, officers and other specialist analysts, as well as earlier engagement with the Crown Office. The timeline for that report, that work to go on, is for the initial business case is for June 2026. So we've moved quite fast to try and get that in a place where it's up and running. And I'm sure the committee will understand that that's not always easily achieved. The supporting capabilities that we have, we're also pushing on with is lab automation. I'm going to struggle with this, I think, for the whole time I talk about it. Automation, and that's a proposal's been presented just this month in relation to automate manual tasks like file extraction and media categorisation within the labs. And this would enable 24/7 processing and creates a dashboard for analysts to significantly reduce their exposure to harmful content, which would be a significant step forward. At the same time, there's a cyber kiosk upgrade, and that's a technical refresh of the kiosk state, not an increase in the number of kiosks, not an increase in how the kiosks actually do their job as it stands at the moment, but will still be considered in line with the rights-based pathway, as you would expect, to ensure modern iOS and Android devices can be triaged at the front line. A completion target date for that hardware rollout is the 31st of March 2027. So what does this all mean? So for me, the strategic alignment in this with the Chief Constable's vision reflects in the sort of following 4 pillars. So safer communities, it creates a modern data handling and reduces the risk of evidence loss and disclosure breaches. It supports less crime, remote access enables faster case progression and more efficient use of the resources in remote areas. It supports victims better, reducing delays and helps prevent the prolonged distress of victims whilst experiencing the long wait for justice and sometimes without actually having possession of their devices. It also supports a thriving workforce. Automation will reduce the arduous task of manual review processes and improve staff welfare by streamlining the high pressure workloads that they have. So the next steps in the governance around about the paper that I've got here. So the oversight of the project is led by the Director of Transformation within Police Scotland, reporting to ACC Houston and myself. The engagement, a dedicated project board has been established, and SPA Forensic Services will be invited to join and represent that side of it. And the financial funding requests will follow the standard business case route as specific solutions and costs are identified. So just in conclusion, before I got my questions, so this project represents a shift towards a future-ready model, moving away from a manual physical data transfers and onward to automated shared digital environment. And Police Scotland aim to reduce these backlogs, support staff wellbeing and deliver faster justice outcomes for victims. Happy to take questions.
Thanks very much for that. Can I just kick off before I get the other board members in about, you've got a big backlog and possible issues with Crown Office deadlines that you touched upon, and so I'm curious how you prioritise the devices that you're dealing with. Can you maybe flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, so much in terms of how police officers put the devices into the labs, we all go through the digital forensics lab, much like the physical forensics, gateway, much like the physical forensics gateway. There we've got a number of staff who identify quickly the threat, risk and harm in each case. And it's on a similar basis, as the SFIs come in from the Procurator Fiscals, we assess them on threat, risk and harm, the level of proceedings that's going to take place, whether they're summary or solemn, and then we look at the timescales and risk assess and try and map that out as best we can. So as much as I talk about a backlog that we have, every case has been assessed in terms of where it needs to sit within our prioritisation matrix, and ultimately while it's challenging and it is a big number, we are confident that we are still dealing with the highest threats, the highest risks and the highest harms in a proportionate and appropriate manner, and always with that constant engagement with our partners in COPFS.
Great. Any questions from any other members? I'm not seeing any hands up. It's a complicated issue, this, and the problems are not confined to Scotland. I think it's very much the same with all the services down south, but obviously we've got to do our best to try and get our system into the most efficient, effective shape. But Yeah, the delivery of approach, is that following the MOU that we've got, and is that going to be assessed against the rights-based pathway?
Yeah, sorry, I think I maybe touched on that slightly, but absolutely in terms of the kiosks being brought in. So I was really keen to refresh the kiosks, get ourselves into a place where we're able to use the software on the most up-to-date technology. So that will be the case. That will follow the rights-based pathway. Unfortunately, the level of cost involved in that involves going through a full procurement process, which will take a little bit of time. However, we do want to look at the functionality in the future, but completely understand that that's all has to follow the rights-based pathway, so that the public and the committee are fully sighted on any sort of new technology and developments that we want to bring in.
Katharina, you want to come in at this point?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for the report, for the presentation. It's all quite clear. And again, I mean, I don't really have a lot to add to this. I suppose my question is, you do touch on this in your report, sort of in the last paragraph, that the delivery timelines. I was interested in the timelines, because the direction of travel seems sensible, but it is well rehearsed that there is a backlog. You have mentioned the fact that there's a year-on-year increases in terms of what comes in. And again, I think it's widely acknowledged that a substantial proportion of crimes have got a digital component to them. So, that digital capability is never going to become less important. It's only going to become more important, and that demand is only going to increase. So the timelines for this activity, I think, will be quite critical. And, you're very diplomatic with say, dependent on approval through appropriate governance routes, and clear timelines will be provided in future updates. I think this is a priority for us. I think if there is anything that kind of makes you think that any elements which will, or any blockers which might impact on timelines, I think we need to have appropriate sight of, because this is a priority. This is a priority for so many different reasons. Again, that we don't need to rehearse any further. But I think if there is one area of capability where we need to see that quite timely progression towards that future state capability, I think we really need to kind of see that here. And something else which was also going kind of through my head is, we will not be the only police force in the UK, or you will not be the only police force in the UK that is kind of grappling with this. So any learnings from any other police forces, I think I'm sure you have considered them as part of formulating your direction of travel. But I think, this isn't about benchmarking, but this is really about understanding what's the art of the possible, and how quickly can we move into that new capability space, so that we don't build up a further backlog, we work through the current backlog, and we just, again, we can respond to all of the increasing demand in a more timely fashion. So I suppose it's just a plea that if there's anything that stands in your way as barriers in terms of unreasonable delays, I think it would be quite prudent. It would be good for us to have early visibility of that, from my perspective.
Thanks very much, and really welcome the support of the committee in relation to that in the paper. I think probably just to provide some reassurance, we have seen substantial investment by Digital Division just at the tail end of last year, and the commitment for the funding for the cyber kiosks for the refresh. That has made quite a substantial difference in terms of the licenses that are now within the labs, to improve our kind of processing and practice. Whilst not making a significant impact on the actual backlog, it has had a significant impact on actually the staff that work within the labs, and that they're now, you've got the latest tools at their hands to allow them to kind of get through that. So even from a sort of staff well-being and perspective, they kind of feel that we're investing in them to try and kind of drive this stuff forward. The whole sort of vision for the future in terms of how we were going to do it was based on some of the benchmarking throughout the rest of the UK, and probably what kind of came to the forefront in my mind was actually recognising how good the actual environment is in Scotland for some of the stuff we want to do, specifically with the use of desk and screen recording capabilities for dealing with victims' devices. That's actually probably the envy of the rest of the UK, and probably out with. But that's only one side of it. That's victims' devices for recovering evidence whereas a lot of what the staff that work for me and within the labs have got to do is be able to analyse data and turn it to evidence to then share it with the fiscals and things like that. So, but no, I absolutely welcome support of the committee. Hope I've kind of articulated what the issues are, and hopefully we'll kind of get through the timelines as quickly as possible and get ourselves in a better position.
Yeah, that's what we're all working towards. So great. If we've got no other comments or questions, if we can just note this, thanks very much for this, Andy, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the joint assurance review of fingerprints. Oh, I've got an action. Right, bear with me. Sorry. Yes, the action log. Sorry. Thank you, Colette, for bringing me back to that. We've got to go back to the action log on this. So if you just bear with me a second, because we did have an outstanding action. So, right, Colette, which one was it again? If you're speaking, Colette, you're muted or not very loud.
I think I did have an action, Chair. I think that's maybe what Colette was saying.
Yeah,
I think
it's action 002 from the October committee.
Okay, so we've got an annual update. Item has been captured within the work plan. So, right, are we happy with that to close that off? And we'll get further reports in due course, I'm sure. Okay, super. Does that satisfy that, Colette? Great, we can close that off then. Super, thanks. Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, great. That then moves us on to the next item, which is a joint assurance review of the acquisition, retention and use of destruction of fingerprints. And we've got Brian Plasto joining us. So welcome.
Thanks, Chair, and I apologise for the lengthy title of that report in advance. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to appear before the committee and just to say a few words about the recent fingerprint assurance review. As members are probably aware, I've been the Biometrics Commissioner in Scotland for just over 5 years now, and every year we conduct at least one assurance review looking either at a biometric topic, for example, DNA, or looking at a biometric theme, for example, its use in relation to children. And in March of this year, we laid this fingerprints assurance review in the Parliament. This was the 6th such review that has been done in the last 4 years. And it's actually the 4th one that we've done in partnership with the Scottish Police Authority. So again, just a thanks from me for the ongoing strength of those strategic relationships. This report was also conducted in partnership with HMICS, who we've worked with before, with the SP Forensic Services and with Police Scotland. And I'm very grateful to ACC Johnson, who's understands just retired, and to Mr Naylor for supporting that work. I think, as highlighted in the report, this was the first deep dive into fingerprints in Scotland since the publication of the Scottish Fingerprints Inquiry back in 2011. And the purpose of the report or the work was to give assurance to Parliament that fingerprints are being used lawfully, ethically and effectively in Scotland. As I said, the report was laid in Parliament on the 10th of March. By happy coincidence, I was before the Criminal Justice Committee the following day, the 11th of March, so we had a chance to speak about it there. And by even happier coincidence, the Chief Constable was also before the Parliament's Public Audit Committee that day, and she very kindly fielded some questions. Members will be familiar with the report. I've had the chance to look at it. If I can just focus on two specific themes. The first on the SPA Forensic Services side is just to draw out the fact that the report provides assurance to Parliament that all pertinent recommendations, of which there were 86 from the Scottish Fingerprint Inquiry, the recommendations made by Sir Anthony Campbell have been successfully implemented. And as I highlight in the report, the SPA Forensic Services provides a world-leading forensic science service to the people of Scotland. And that's not just my view, that's something that's not lost on the recent House of Lords Science and Technology Committee report, which found that the Forensic Science Service in England and Wales is in a state of collapse and a crisis. So it's something we should be proud of. And I have to say I'm really grateful to Fiona and her outstanding team for supporting this work as well. The second point to make on the Police Scotland side of the business is to emphasise that during the time that I've been in office, Police Scotland has significantly improved its strategic governance around biometrics. But one of the consequences of that, and I refer to this in the report as the measurement effect, is that Police Scotland are far now more aware of when their own policy is not being followed. And as highlighted in the report, the management information that Police Scotland now produce highlighted that during 2025, a significant volume of officially accused people were not fingerprinted after they'd been arrested, when Police Scotland's own policy dictates that they should be. So the report has 10 recommendations, mostly made to Police Scotland's Criminal Justice Services Division, the most significant of which is the one around adherence to Police Scotland's own policy. Members of the committee are probably aware that the Chief Constable has given assurances to the Parliament's Public Audit Committee that the report recommendations are accepted and will be progressed. And again, I'm extraordinarily grateful to the Chief Constable for those assurances. And as always, I'm very happy to take any questions on the report, Chair. But again, just to emphasise my thanks once again to Fiona, to Police Scotland, to HMICS for the joint working in this arena. So I'll stop there, Chair.
Thanks for that, Brian. And it's good to hear about the progress in forensics. Now, I've got a wee note that Katharina, you wanted to pitch in on this first.
Yes, yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Brian, for the report. Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. I think, you know, it was a fascinating read, I have to say. It was like a school day. Learned loads about fingerprints, etc., etc. So really, really interesting. And lots of really quite sensible recommendations. And if I may say so, I think, you know, the recommendations are formulated in a very sensible way in terms of asking Police Scotland to consider. So they're not sort of instructions, do this or do that. So which, you know, I think gives our colleagues in Police Scotland a lot of scope to really engage with the recommendations and see what's the best way to implement them. And then obviously with my committee kind of assurance hat on, yeah, I think there is a lot to kind of dig into here, but I would just maybe like to have a little bit of assurance and maybe an explanation, if possible, around exactly that, you know, adherence to policy. So there's for me there are several strands there. I mean, the first one, maybe the most obvious one, is this: if Police Scotland has got a policy, what assurance can you give us now that you've had this report and you've had time to hopefully consider it, that you will be on top of the adherence to policy? What controls will you have around that? Because actually, you know, there was a number of things that that the report highlights. It's around training, it's around adequate supervision. So they all kind of come together with the result that the policy itself isn't being followed always reliably, with some quite significant consequences. So that's the first element. And the second element, there is a difference in the policy between Police Scotland and some of the other forces around that officially accused things, status of people and the use of and the taking of fingerprints. So maybe if I just pause at this and maybe could just get a perspective on those two elements.
Now, who is going to speak on this for Police Scotland? Yes, Tim.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the Commissioner for this report. I think it speaks to the foundation of policing. Biometrics, but particularly fingerprints, essentially underpin our whole criminal justice system. They are the item that connect an individual to an incident, and that can last long beyond their conviction in court. So the principle of ensuring that we are capturing those effectively and to a good quality is critical. It's changed even in my career. I remember it used to be exclusively ink and ruling, and it was a skill in itself to get that right. We now have, you know, the digital solution to that. So speaking sort of on behalf of my colleague Mark Sutherland, obviously, who's the ACC for Criminal Justice, it's really clear that there's an awful lot that we need to do. We would support the Commissioner's views that there is no one single thing that will fix this. The custody environment, as you'll appreciate, is an exceptionally busy, complex environment. We are managing people who can be violent, people who can be very upset and vulnerable, often at really, really busy times. It's a massive pressure on staff. So there are issues around IT, technology, process. There are issues around skills, training, and capacity. But the bottom line is that our commitment is absolutely clear around adherence to the policy. It's essential that we get this right, and this report has certainly shone a light on that. But is also, as Casper has indicated, done it in a very constructive and positive way, and we really, really welcome that. I think the issues around accused, not officially accused, are a good example of how Scotland has to take a unique approach to this and ensure that it's suitable to the circumstances we have. And we're not, unlike England, Wales and Northern Ireland, we don't work to pace, so it's different provisions, but that even applies to other parts of legislation around fingerprints and others. So whilst it creates a slightly different approach, it certainly doesn't make it impossible for us to navigate our way through that.
Can I come back in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate you speaking on behalf of Mark, so to say. And I absolutely hear and welcome what you're saying. Having read the reports, I think I understand more just how complex the environment is, and I appreciate, the colleagues are not taking fingerprints in the most ideal of circumstances. I think that's probably this understatement. So but at the same time, there is some really kind of, there's training, supervision, etc. So all of those themes are coming up. So will there be, I suppose, how are you addressing this? Will there be an action plan? I presume somewhere there will be an action plan on the back of these recommendations, and then that will be going through appropriate governance, I take it, right? So that's the first kind of follow-up question. And the second follow-up question is on the difference. I appreciate that Scotland isn't a different jurisdiction to England and Wales and Northern Ireland, but at the same time, I think with my public interest hat on, what has jumped at me from Brian's report is the fact that Police Scotland may be missing investigative opportunities by following a different approach. So and just because we're not under pace, that's not to say that we couldn't. I think this is what I've been reading from this report. So I think from my perspective, I don't know how you're proposing to address this, but I think this is something that would warrant further conversation as well in terms of pros and contras and what's possible, because actually, to me, that's quite a substantial difference in practice to other police forces. And I would not want, the public to feel that we're at a disadvantage because we work within a different system, which I don't think you're saying, but I think I would quite like to have a little bit more detail around that.
So I'll start with that point and come to the governance bit. I had the misfortune of leading on biometrics in Northern Ireland under a PACE system for a long time, and the implementation of the Criminal Justice Act there. And the challenges are different. I don't think they are better or worse. So under a PACE system where there's, I would argue, probably a different approach to justification of arrest, what that meant was there were an awful lot more people dealt with in Northern Ireland by way of voluntary attendance, and that often included people for serious historical offences, including historical sexual offences. And in those scenarios, we were not taking any biometrics. So different systems create different issues and challenges. I don't believe, and I'll defer to the Commissioner on this, I don't believe that anyone, whether it's PACE or whether it's the current system here, is better or worse. It's how we ensure that we maximise the capture, retention, and where appropriate disposal of biometrics in the full range of cases. And there are legislative provisions and other provisions that are available to us that allow us to do that. We need to use them more effectively, and we need to do it in a more comprehensive way. But we also need to do that against threat, harm, and risk, because probably our ability to capture fingerprints and biometrics in every case is a challenge. And again, on DNA, there's opportunities for us to reduce what we're doing and be more efficient on fingerprints, there's always this continual debate about whether you fingerprint on every occasion because you can get additional ridge detail, or whether we take more of a risk-based approach to that. So all of those aspects around process are critical. But my sense is that no one system is better or worse, and I don't believe that the Scottish public are put at risk by the way this currently works. It's up to us to design a system that maximises public safety. And on the point around governance, the good news is you get 2 ACCs for the price of one on this. So obviously I oversee the biometrics work, and so I'll have visibility of that. Mark, as you say, will have a clear action plan, and Chris Stewart is the chief superintendent there. Within custody division will drive that, but it's very much a joint effort, and there's an awful lot of work going across the supervision, training, technical and process that will seek to address this. So yes, specific focus within Criminal Justice Services division, but a wider focus across biometrics to ensure that we're joining up all the dots across that. And obviously we will keep the committee updated on progress.
So can I just ask, because I'm still bamboozled as to why we take a different approach from down south and we're not fingerprinting everyone we can fingerprint. Is that a matter of national legislation, or is it police policy?
Do you want me to cover that, Chair?
If anyone can answer, Brian, if you can, that'd be helpful.
More authority than me.
Yeah, so it's down to a legislative change in Scotland that happened around 2016. In Scotland, people used to be either arrested or detained. It essentially meant the same thing. But there was a change in 2016, I think it was, and this new status of either you're arrested as an officially accused person, i.e. there's already enough evidence to charge you, or you're arrested as a not officially accused person, another word for you're detained. And so it appears that the policy at that time, around about 2016, the fingerprint policy was changed to accommodate you must fingerprint everyone who is officially accused, and you may fingerprint people who are not officially accused if you feel you need to, basically. So that's the change. So in England and Wales and in Northern Ireland don't have officially accused. It was different legislation because obviously, policing in England and Wales comes under one sort of common jurisdiction. In Northern Ireland's devolved, Scotland's devolved. So it's just slightly different approaches to criminal procedure, I suppose.
So it wouldn't require a legislative change for Police Scotland to fingerprint everyone. And unlike DNA, which is expensive to do the testing, relatively so, fingerprinting, you've got them on file, you can whack it into a computer, and if they're being arrested for shoplifting and they've done multiple homicides somewhere else and you've not been able to find them because they've never been busted for anything else, you can then find them.
Yep,
yeah,
that's it.
So it's lost opportunities for policing. Okay, so if we wanted to do that, we could just, presumably Police Scotland could just be instructed to do that by the Chief Constable. So.
Yeah, I think the reason, and Katharina picked this subtle point up very well, the reason why we've framed many of the recommendations as should consider, as we're acutely aware of the budgetary pressures on Police Scotland, which in turn translate into resourcing pressures, etc., etc. So in an ideal world, yes.
It's not I get that it's not just as simple as, directed from the top, because there's things that need to be, obviously forensics need to be scaled up to deal with more or whatever, but it's a policy change rather than a legislative change, which takes years. So, sorry, Tim, you wanted to come back on this, and I'll come back to Catherine and then Andrew, if that's okay. Sorry, Andrew, I've kept you waiting.
Oh, you're muted, Tim. Yeah, apologies. Yeah, just very quickly. Yeah, I mean, clearly, I suppose if we were to do the flowchart on this, someone who's not officially accused and then never proceeds beyond that, we're not going to progress against. Someone who is not officially accused and moves to officially accused, we are, and therefore we take the fingerprints. So certainly it is a policy position, and it's one that we can choose to change. similar to a lot of the volume crime conversations we have today, we'd need to just stack up the proportionality of deciding to make that change, because you would end up in a position with a policy where someone would be having their fingerprints taken twice, both as not officially accused and as officially accused. I would say if we take the highlight of this paper, we're not even necessarily taking the fingerprints of the people who are officially accused right now. So we need to get that bit right before we start to think about increasing the load. So yes, it would be a policy change, but I would suggest it needs to be held in balance with all the other things that we need to consider, with the overall objective of taking the right fingerprints at the right time to achieve the right outcomes.
Okay. I'll go to Katharina next, and then I'll bring in Andrew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tim. Absolutely, I think it's good to have that confirmed that it would be a policy change, and fully appreciate there's different factors. May I just suggest, because as I say, I think we're having this conversation now, and I think what certainly I would appreciate, and I don't know how colleagues feel, is to have exactly that, a bit of an analysis on this, a cost-benefit analysis. I think it would be really helpful to understand, because I appreciate, Tim, everything comes with a cost and with opportunity costs. If we're doing this, we're not doing Y, etc., etc. But at the same time, Brian says in his report, there may well be investigative opportunities that we might not be seizing. So it's just, I think, I appreciate Brian's report comes from a particular perspective, and I think it would be really helpful to have the practicalities and the costs associated with the policy change, so that we could understand it a little bit more, so that we would be working in a more informed environment around this. I think I personally would appreciate that. I think that would add a lot to the conversation from my perspective.
Yeah. Are you wanting to come back on this, Tim, before I get Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, I think it may be helpful as a next step that we bring back the action plan and look at everything across the whole context. So I agree with what you're saying around the analysis element, but I think we have to look at the full range of actions to kind of allow Police Scotland to kind of consider what we think the priorities are, what the optimum opportunities are to achieve what we're trying to bring, and then we'll bring that back, and that allows us to look at everything in the round as opposed to one specific piece of it, if that's acceptable.
Super. Andrew?
Chair, thank you. Certainly, as a new board member, I find this report really interesting, and I appreciate the Commissioner's narrative today. It helps just set the scene quite a bit. I understand what the ACC says on, obviously, in essence, focusing on the accused data first and trying to make sure that we're performing at a level that we're happy with there before we move on to the next stage, if indeed we do as an organisation. I did note the amazingly small percentage of people who were fingerprinted in the trial, who weren't fingerprinted, who had no previous fingerprints, i.e. It was a really small percentage there. Look forward to seeing the improvement plan. I just wanted to drill down into one of the recommendations first, which I think was number 7, which was touching on the live scan machines and the availability of them. And I just wouldn't mind getting some indication of the potential resource requirement of us fixing this problem, if I can be so bold as to phrase it that way. How many more of these machines might we need to procure?
I can help with that one if you like.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So this was about we simply repeated something in this report that had already been said by HMICS in a previous custody inspection, which was that some of the Highlands and Islands, notably Orkney and Shetland, the police officers there didn't have access to a live scan machine, and they obviously then had to do the bit that you were referring to, Tim, which was what I've done myself years ago, which is covering yourself and the prisoner in ink. And those paper forms then take ages to reach where they need to go. So part of the issue was that Police Scotland had rationalised its custody estate. So there were, I don't know, spare machines lying about that could have been redeployed. So it was a bit about just highlighting, and this, we make the point in the report about the lack of adequate capital investment by Scottish Government to Police Scotland since 2013. So there's a bit in there about, why didn't Orkney and Shetland have that facility in the first place? But then secondly, given that other custody centres have closed and there are spare machines, well, there's a kind of obvious solution to some of that. So that's where we were coming from. That one, it was about equitability of access to modern fingerprint facilities across the whole of Scotland.
Are these instruments expensive? Because I mean, you see fingerprint technology being used in all our devices and things now. So
yeah, they're about £5,000. It's basically like a big photocopier. Is for anybody who's not seen one, it's like a big photocopier. But obviously they're networked into the Home Office system, and also they connect to the immigration and asylum database as well. So you're not just searching police fingerprints, you're searching immigration at the same time.
Right. Okay. So Fiona.
It's an unrelated point, Chair, but I wanted to thank Brian very much for his report, and particularly in relation to having undertaken that independent review of the recommendations made by the fingerprint inquiry. The fingerprint inquiry was an absolutely linchpin fundamental moment for forensic services, and so much work has gone into addressing the recommendations of the inquiry, and actually influenced the legislation that set forensic services and the Scottish Police Authority up in 2013. So it was an absolutely fundamental moment in time, and I'm very grateful for Brian of having come in and looked at how we have addressed the recommendations made in that, and that you're able to provide that independent assurance that those recommendations have been addressed. So I think it's very reassuring from my perspective that we have your commitment, your report that shows the commitment that has been put into that work. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona.
No, that's well said. Okay. If we've got no more questions or comments, I'm going to move us on. I think we're asked to, if you bear with me a second, I'll try and find the recommendations. So I'm working off about 4 different programmes here. We're requested to note the review and the 10 recommendations that are made, and to seek assurance from Police Scotland and SPA's Forensic Services that the recommendations for improvement will be progressed. So we've sought that, and it would be good to get an annual report on this for the next I think we've got an expectation that an annual report will be presented to the next Forensic Services Committee in August. Am I correct with that? Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wondered whether we've received enough information regarding the timetable of delivery of the recommendations.
Yeah. Anyone?
If it helps, I can. Yeah. I'm aware that action plan has been developed by Police Scotland. I would think that will probably go to the next Police Scotland Biometrics Oversight Board, which will be Tim's first one, which off the top of my head, I think is possibly in June, although I could be wrong. Sorry. It's in the diary anyway.
Yeah. I think, Colette, am I correct in thinking we're slotted to get an annual report in August? I've got a note here saying something about that.
Yeah, that'll be reflected in the work plan, Chair.
Okay, in the work plan. So we can get that one, what's the word, wired into the work plan. Super. Okay, can I move us then on to the next item, which is Forensic Services Change Programme. And that's Joanne Tierney, who's presenting. Joanne, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the paper as read, but highlight a few key areas. Overall, the programme is tracking amber against the programme plan, which is contained at Appendix A. This is mostly due to some resource challenges in long-term sustainable model and in the centralised purchasing project. The key highlight is that the operating model project, which commenced in 2019, has now reached the stage of formal project closure, and the report brings out some key deliverables that we have achieved. In short, the operating model design has been embedded and represents a strong foundation from which forensic services will be able to move forward to provide a resilient and responsive organisation structure in order to cope with fluctuations in demands. We had 3 key phases to the operating model: design, consultation and implementation, and there is a contained in Appendix B a summary of everything that has been delivered, work that remains in progress and translating over to activity in business as usual, as well as some activity which was not yet started or de-scoped to reflection of the challenging financial and landscape that was over the implementation phase of the project. We have had significant success in terms of moving away from our rigid scientific discipline-based structure and now operating in an outcome-focused capability structure of search, recovery, analysis, reporting, national services and organisational support. Our people were very fundamental to the design and consultation and implementation of the operating model structure, and as I say, it represents a strong foundation from which we can move forward. Key elements such as the introduction of the frontline capability team manager role and a forensic operations lead role have been responded to very positively, both internally and externally from our partners. As reported in previous updates, we've had an overwhelmingly positive responses from Police Scotland partners, particularly in relation to improved service on large scale and complex operation activity as a direct result of our forensic operation role. We had, by way of formal closure, some key documents. The end project report, gap analysis and the list of activity were presented at the Operating Model Project Board and will be proceeded with in the Forensic Services Change Programme Board on the 19th of May for final approval and formal closure. In terms of the operating model benefits, I have an appendix in the paper that indicates how the high-level outcomes of the operating model, which were around faster delivery of intelligence results for acquisitive and volume crime, improved staff well-being and improved potential career path opportunities, and improved levels of staff and customer satisfaction, and as I've already mentioned, improved resilience to cope with fluctuating demand and response to complex and large-scale incidents. The Appendix C demonstrates how I will continue to engage with the performance and reporting activity that is ongoing in business as usual to ensure we continue to be able to monitor our success against those high level outcomes and how we will bring that monitoring and reporting updates back to the committee as part of my ongoing change updates. I think it's important to note that one of the key elements is for the op model design was focused on the well-being and career paths of our people in our organisation who are fundamental to the service we deliver. And in the first year of implementation, 72 of our people had gained promotion to a higher grade, with 19 becoming a line manager for the first time and 36 moving from temporary to permanent positions. This is key achievement and is reflected in the career development for opportunities that we're offering for our staff. We also established new search and recovery laboratories in Edinburgh and Aberdeen and have implemented mixed reporting teams at all sites, which again allows us to move forward with improved whole case management and visibility, making sure we maximise our capacity to meet demand. Moving on to the cause and data migration project. The cause and data migration project is tracking green. It's really important to understand that the cause and data migration project is a key enabler to really build on the foundations of the operating model design and release those benefits. It's absolutely critical that we have a system that's fit for purpose and reflects our new operating model structure, but is also future-proof to take on board technological developments such as AI, data mining and data learning to help forensic services deliver not only their service but be future-proofed to maximise productivity and capacity improvements that a fit-for-purpose solution will allow us to enjoy. Yeah. In terms of the detail of the project, following the successful conclusion of the invitation to participate, our formal invitation to tender was issued just before Christmas. First round submissions were received in February, and we're currently going through our negotiations and clarifications process with our suppliers to better understand how the requirements will be met and to ensure that we've got a product that's fit for purpose and will allow forensic services to release those capacity and productivity efficiencies. The full business case, as I've already mentioned, will be available by October to go through the governance channels, and we will be seeking funding approval for that as part of that process, evidencing the benefits that the core operating solution will bring and the criticality of it to the improved service delivery forensic services required. In terms of the long-term sustainable model, this is sitting at amber, and that is mainly due to some resource challenges in terms of the portfolio services back that we're able to access through Police Scotland. We're very grateful for all of the resources that have been afforded to forensic services, and I understand from the time of reporting that actually we're moving forward with allocation of a project manager to this project. We have been moving forward based on the initial business case approval, which is proceeding in terms of outlining what would be required for a new estate in order to meet the anticipated demand. As we've already heard earlier in the committee, some ongoing conversations are ongoing at various levels with colleagues in Police Scotland around the demand modelling, but within the project we are proceeding to complete the full business case with a view for submission in October as well through the governance and approvals challenge. Our centralised purchasing is also sitting at amber due to some resource challenges in getting the project team mobilised, but we have made significant progress in terms of identifying immediate improvements and mapping the as-is position with regard to our purchasing. We again are confident that this project will evidence significant efficiency savings in a more centralised and joined up approach to our centralised purchasing within forensic services. Those are the key highlights of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive run through the change programme, Joanne. Do we have any questions or comments from board members? No? It's I'm just going to allow me to get my note up. Yeah, there seems to be a kind of running theme here of vacancies. So I'm curious about, that seems to have impacted on a number of issues across the change programme. So has there been an effective prioritisation review of the projects relating to vacancy management?
Yes, with regard to that, we have been very grateful for an increased level of support from our colleagues in portfolio from Police Scotland. There was some restructuring that went on within Police Scotland, and it led to some recruitment of project managers, which is why we were sitting with a gap in a project manager in the long-term sustainable model. That's been a short-term gap, and we have been able to have our programme manager step in. It hasn't impacted on progress in terms of the development of the activity around estate scoping and work streams within the long-term sustainable model, and we understand that the resource will be made available in due course. So we're not concerned that it will impact on the progression of the project.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone else?
Chair, can I just add to Joanne's
yes,
comments there? So I've been working closely with Police Scotland colleagues around the prioritisation of the transformation project. So there's clearly financial challenges, which we've talked about as a theme throughout the discussion, and that means that difficult decisions need to be made around the priorities of a range of change activity that exists within forensic services and across Police Scotland. So I've discussed that with the Director of Transformation. We do have her support in the activities that we're progressing. There has been quite a lot of movement between posts within the transformation team within Police Scotland, and I think that's resulted in people moving between different activities, which has certainly impacted on forensic services. But we have got the commitment from Police Scotland Transformation to support the key priority areas which we're progressing in forensic services, particularly the core operating system project and the long-term sustainable model. So as Joanne says, we do have that assurance. The projects are continuing. There is a slight impact in terms of some delays there, but we understand the challenges that Police Scotland Transformation are under at the current point in time with the financial settlement we've received.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Okay, if we've got no more questions on this, just bear with me while I get the recommendations up for this one. We're asked to its recommendation is for discussion. So we have had a good discussion, and I'm suitably reassured. So if we can note this, I've got a note suggesting we have a 5-minute comfort break at this point, and we're a bit ahead of schedule. So could I suggest we have a 10-minute comfort break, and that gives people time to get a cup of tea. So if we come back at 12:15, and then I'll maybe pick up the pace a little bit when we're back. So if you can switch your cameras off and mute and come back at 12:15. Okay, thanks. which is the HMICS Assurance Review of Forensic Toxicology Provision. And Fiona, you're leading on this.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, you're going to have to listen to me for the next 3 agenda items. This one will be relatively short and sweet. In relation to the HMICS review, we now have 21 out of the 25 recommendations that HMICS made in relation to forensic toxicology provision that have been closed, which is an increase of 5 since the last Forensic Services Committee meeting, which is really significant progress. And I'd really like to pass on my thanks to Police Scotland, Crown Office and colleagues in Forensic Services for being able to address those 5 recommendations to HMICS's satisfaction. We have 4 remaining recommendations, 2 of which are in the final stages, we hope, of closure, and 2 of those are related to long-term work, particularly in relation to the core operating system project and the long-term sustainable model project, which we've already talked about in the change update. So that concludes my comments. Chair, happy to take any questions.
Great. Any questions from board members? No, not surprised. That's super. If we can then, I don't think we're going to need this on a quarterly basis. Could we maybe get something fed back to us in a year's time when hopefully the other 2 items are completed?
Sure, no problem.
Super. And if you can capture that, Colette, I'd be most grateful. So super, that's great. That then moves us on to the strategic business plan. Now, this is one item we've actually got to make a decision on today for approval. So again, it's you, Fiona. So I'll let you say your piece.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. The paper in front of you presents the strategic business plan for forensic services and sets out a clear framework for how the organisation intends to deliver modern, sustainable and resilient forensic science services over the coming 2 years. The plan is grounded in the recognition that forensic science operates in an increasingly challenging and complex environment. Demand continues to evolve across toxicology, biometrics and specialist forensic disciplines, while expectations around quality, accreditation, timelines and scientific assurance continue to increase. And we've touched on a number of those through the discussions already this morning. At the same time, the organisation must respond to financial pressures, workforce challenges, and the need for ongoing transformation. What comes through strongly, I hope, in the paper is a focus on sustainability and resilience. The plan recognises that maintaining high-quality operational delivery today must be balanced with building the workforce, infrastructure, and capability required for the future. There is therefore a significant emphasis on workforce planning, leadership capability, specialist skills development and succession planning across a range of key forensic disciplines. Members should also be assured that the business plan is closely aligned to wider policing and justice priorities across Scotland. It positions forensic science and as a critical national capability that supports policing the courts, public protection and public confidence in the justice system. In particular, the plan recognises the importance of forensic science in responding to evolving threats, including drug harm, serious organised crime, violence against women and girls, and the increasing complexity of evidential requirements. A further key theme running through the paper is operational improvement. The plan identifies the need to strengthen performance management, improve governance, modernise processes and invest in areas where operational demand is increasing. This includes that continued focus on toxicology improvement activity, biometrics assurance and change programme delivery. These are not standalone initiatives. They are integral to creating a more resilient and effective forensic service. Importantly, the paper also places considerable emphasis on quality and accreditation. Maintaining accreditation and scientific standards is fundamental to the credibility of forensic evidence and to maintaining confidence of forensic evidence from policing, Crown Office, the courts and the public. The business plan recognises that quality must remain central to all service development and operational delivery. Financial sustainability is addressed openly within the plan. The paper recognises the need to operate within a constrained financial environment, whilst continuing to deliver operational services and invest strategically for the future. That balance between affordability, operational demand and long-term capability is one of the central challenges that has been identified. Finally, I think the plan reflects an organisation that is moving beyond a period of significant transformation and increasingly focused on maturity, stability, and long-term strategic direction. It sets out a clear ambition for forensic services to remain operationally effective, scientifically credible, and capable of supporting Scotland's justice system into the future. I would really like to recognise the contribution of staff across forensic services whose professionalism and commitment underpin the operational performance and the strategic progress that's reflected within the updated business plan. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks very much for that, and thanks for the plan presented to us today. I think it's a very clear plan, and it's very easy to read. And I note that you've got SMART deliverables in there, and I think that's good practice. I just wanted to acknowledge that. I'm going to kick off with one question, which is my recollection that we approved the performance framework in February, which is obviously prior to the business plan being finalised. So I'm curious, is there anything that needs to be adjusted in your perspective in the performance framework, or has that been set up to kind of be future-proofed?
I don't think there is anything just now that needs to be updated within the performance framework. The development of the business plan has been undertaken over a 6-month period. It's been a very structured exercise where we've engaged with lots of people across the service to try to make sure that we've got better strategic alignment. So as the performance framework was being updated, this work has already been ongoing, so they complement each other completely.
Oh, great. Any questions from any other members? Andrew.
Chair, thank you. It's a really clear paper. The appendix has the 4 strategic outcomes with the various deliverables, and it's really encouraging to see clear dates attached to those. I know we're just at the stage, hopefully, of approving this today, but through the course of this plan, are there any of those deliverables which are causing you particular concerns at this stage?
I think we're going to come on and talk around some of the culture-related work that we're undertaking within forensic services in the next paper, and I think that's probably the most challenging area that we have. We know we have a lot of work to do in relation to quality and quality assurance. There's always a lot of work to do to maintain our accreditation, which is so important, I think, in terms of the credibility of the system and also the assurances that we get as a leadership team. So I would say probably the culture work is the area that I think is harder to put your finger on in terms of us actually delivering the outcomes which we set out that we want to achieve.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm very happy with the paper, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. If we've got no other questions or comments, could I then suggest that we agree the recommendation that the business plan is approved, and we'll obviously get reports back in due course about its delivery, because that's what we do as a forensics committee. Super. Great, and that moves us then on to item 9, which is, item 10, which is the, nope, I'll stop. Forensic Services, yeah, item 10, Forensic Services Survey Action Plan. So again, that's you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. And if you'll indulge me with a slightly longer introduction to this
Sure.
paper, given it's so important in terms of the priorities and the work that we're undertaking within forensic services. So the paper hopefully provides the committee with a strong update on the Staff Survey Action Plan, which was developed in response to the 2024 and the 2025 staff survey results. And it sets out the activity underway to address key themes identified by colleagues across forensic services, and we've talked a lot about the various things that we have been doing with members in previous committee meetings. And as members will recall from previous reports, the overall survey results last year showed some encouraging improvement compared to the previous year, including a 3% overall increase and a particularly notable improvement in confidence in senior leadership, which increased by 19%. The paper recognises that this reflects sustained effort around leadership visibility, communication and engagement over the past year. However, the survey also identified a number of important areas where staff experience and organisational culture require continued focus and improvement. In particular, concerns remain around workload pressures, well-being, dignity and respect, communication, and the consistency of people management experience across the organisation. The purpose of this paper is therefore not simply to present the survey findings, which we have done previously, but to provide assurance to the committee that there is a structured and measurable programme of improvement activity underway in response. Members will see that the action plan is developed around several core themes arising directly from staff feedback. These include leadership and communication, well-being and support, learning and development, workforce planning and organisational culture. Importantly, the paper emphasises that the intention is not to create isolated short-term initiatives, but to embed longer-term cultural and organisational improvement activity across forensic services. The appendix to the paper is particularly important in this regard because it provides additional detail on the inclusivity and culture work being progressed across the organisation. Members will note that this includes a specific focus on ensuring that staff feel respected, valued, and able to contribute fully, regardless of background, role, or location. The appendix recognises that while overall survey scores improved, there remain areas where colleagues' experiences are not consistently positive, particularly in relation to dignity, respect, and inclusion. In response, the action plan includes a range of measures intended to strengthen inclusive leadership, improve awareness and confidence, and also increased confidence in reporting concerns and to support a more structured, respectful workplace culture. This includes targeted engagement activity, leadership development, ongoing work with staff networks, and actions linked to equality, diversity, and inclusion priorities. The paper also references the importance of managers creating psychologically safe environments where staff feel able to raise concerns, contribute ideas, and challenge appropriately. Members will also note the emphasis placed on listening and engagement within the appendix. Local discussions and workshops were undertaken across functions and locations following publication of the survey results to ensure that colleagues had the opportunity to explore the findings in more detail and shape the actions developed in response. The paper recognises that building trust is not only about producing action plans centrally, but on staff seeing that their experiences and their feedback are being actively heard and acted upon locally. In relation to leadership and communication more broadly, members will note a number of initiatives intended to improve visibility, consistency, and engagement across the organisation. These include enhanced leadership briefings, increased opportunities for direct staff engagement with senior leaders, and continued development of communication channels designed to improve and provide greater clarity around organisational priorities and decision-making. The paper also places significant emphasis on well-being and workload management. As members are aware, many areas of forensic services operate under sustained operational pressure, particularly within specialist disciplines where sometimes recruitment and retention can be challenging. The action plan therefore includes work to strengthen well-being support arrangements, improve management capability, and ensure that workforce planning activity aligns more effectively with operational demand and staff capacity. Members will also see links between this work and the wider strategic workforce plan approved earlier this year. The paper recognises that issues related to workload development, opportunities, resilience, and organisational culture cannot be addressed in isolation from longer-term workforce sustainability challenges. As such, the staff survey action plan is intended to complement wider organisational improvement activity already underway across recruitment, succession planning, leadership development, and workforce modelling, some of which is we've talked about within the business plan. Importantly, the paper also recognises that trust and credibility in this process will depend on maintaining momentum and demonstrating measurable progress over time. For that reason, governance and oversight arrangements have been established to monitor delivery of the actions and to ensure continued engagement with staff as work progresses. Overall, the paper presents a realistic and a balanced assessment of the current position. It acknowledges the areas where progress has been made, recognises the issues that continue to concern staff, and outlines a structured programme of activity intended to support sustainable improvement in culture, well-being, inclusivity, and staff experience across forensic services. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. I mean, I would make the observation that cultural change is, you've got to be in it for the long haul. It takes a long, long time. And it's you're never quite finished, because it's like climbing mountains. There's always a higher peak once you've scaled one. But I'm happy to see the progress that's been made. I'm much more happy to see the progress that you're dangling in front of us, you know, in terms of the action plan and what you're wanting to do, because there has been, you know, particularly some of the markers, significant progress over the last couple of years, but one or two where a couple where there's just been a little bit of a dip in score, but areas do need addressed. So does anyone from any of the board members have anything to add to this? No, we've got our full backing in trying to get this implemented. We do know it does take time. And a lot of this is about, it can't be a one and done. You can't just say things just that this will be so. It has to be again, repeated again and again and again for messages to get through. But we do want people to come to work. And I mean, what's it called? Forensic science is very much a vocation. People often come into this. It's unlike an awful lot of other work where people will move from one area to another. It's such a specialist role that people often come in for their full careers, and we want to make this as rewarding a career as humanly possible in all senses. So anyway, we'll get further reports on this in due course. I'm going to move us then on to the next item, which is the committee work plan, and it's the last item in the public session. I think that's just for noting. Is there anything we're adding to this, Colette, from the discussions?
There will be a few things added to it, Chair, but I'll reflect that on the work plan and share an updated version.
Then in that case, can I draw the public part of this meeting to a close, and we'll have a short pause as we stop the broadcast and we move into the private